serious?
Hi, my name's Rest. I'm an Elden Ring content creator with an emphasis on PvP. Backstabs got a buff in patch 1.10, but it seems like very few people actually understand what's different about it. All they know is, they're getting backstabs. But in the majority of cases, it's just placebo, and nothing's actually different about how their particular backstab would have worked before the patch. In this video, I'll be covering how the patch actually changed backstabs and provide a showcase with some examples of backstabs that are now possible after the patch, and others that only look like they shouldn't have landed, and I'll explain what makes them possible. Before we get into this video, I have two other videos that I've done previously on the fundamentals of backstabs, but there's been new light in the way that the grab confirmation works. Backstabs rely on two checks in order for a grab to be successful, an angle check and a distance check. If the opposing player moves outside of a grab box, then the grab will fail. And if the player rotates to face you, then the grab will fail as well. What changed with this patch was the angle check was raised from 120 degrees to 135 degrees. So if the player is rotating to face you in order to escape grab, then the grab is marginally more likely to be successful. However, these checks use a two-sided confirmation, meaning that it only matters if the other player perceives that they haven't rotated that full 135 degrees. In previous Dark Souls games, like Dark Souls 3, the angle check was only client-side, so the opposing player could fully rotate to face you and they'd be snapped back into a backstab. But then, why does this happen? I have a confession. The information in my previous videos was wrong. Previously, we thought that backstab confirmations only performed an angle check on the client side, meaning that if the opponent turns 180 degrees to face you, then as long as the grab was confirmed on your screen, then the grab is successful. That is in fact not the case. This is a little complicated, so bear with me. The thing that makes these weird types of backstabs possible is something called positional displacement. Basically, where I see the opponent on my screen is different than where they see themselves on their screen, and where they see me, I'm likely somewhere else. This only happens during movement, and Elden Ring struggles with its shitty netcode to figure out where player A is standing relative to player B. So, let's use this example again. As I move behind my opponent, their character continues to track where they see my character is standing. I'm able to get to their back and initiate the grab. From that point in time where the backstab is confirmed, they only are able to rotate about 90 degrees, whereas they had physically moved several steps. Though still within range of the grab box. This doesn't work this way in static standing, and if my opponent is able to rotate to face you past 135 degrees, then they will never be backstabbed. Well, I say never, but actually if the opposing player is on a VPN or Wi-Fi, then it's actually still possible. On VPN or Wi-Fi, packet information can be sent across the network and arrive late or drop completely. If that packet information in the backstab grab is sent late, then all kinds of wild shit can happen. But even something like this was entirely possible before the patch. What's happening in this clip is both players are reading their positions as being behind the opposing player and both initiating the backstab grab at the same frame. Neither player rotates nor moves out of the opposing player's grab box, so both backstabs confirm. When this happens, the damage of the backstabs are negated, similar to how you might have seen where a parry lands on someone and their riposte does no damage. The change to backstabs didn't affect the size of the grab box, the speed of the grab, or anything else for that matter. Only the opposing player's ability to rotate in order to escape a grab, but it's so marginal of a difference that you might hardly ever see an instance where it's meaningful. But unfortunately for you, I fucking love backstab fishing. So from this point in the video, I'll be covering a showcase of the concepts covered in the video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you found the information helpful at all, or if you're more confused than ever. To start with, landing a backstab off a parry whiff is marginally easier, since the parry locks the rotation of the player's feet while the parry activates, so it's a lot easier to get behind them and land a grab before they can rotate out of it. This was always possible before the patch, but now you have like one extra frame of time to be able to confirm the grab if they whiff a parry. But honestly, that one extra frame can be the difference between a successful or a failed grab, so hell, I'll take it. But please, for the love of fucking God, stop spamming parry. Please, seek help. Next up, my opponent is using a one-handed Spy and a Great Shield. Colossal swords are very easy to strafe when they're crouching rolling R1s if you get close and strafe to the right where the tracking is weakest. We line up a few attempts, but we're late to get the grab each time, but my opponent seems really uncomfortable when I'm up in their face and they start panic rolling a bit. So here we go for a counter strafe, which is the application of that movement displacement concept that we covered earlier in the video to get the backstab. We get the hits on the wake up, but my opponent seems fully committed to going for their L2 for some reason, so I back off and let them do it. I throw out a random fan dagger and go for a running attack, in which I line up a grab on their forward roll and catch it with a backstab to end the fight. My next opponent is using Godfrey's Axe, which I find a very fun weapon, but is extremely susceptible to backstabs. We run in and pivot to get the grab, but our latency is really high here. The ground slam goes off, but the grab is still successful because I had already confirmed the grab on my side of the connection, even though it looked like it was laid on their screen. Since they didn't move or rotate past 130 degrees, the grab was successful. I go for the punish on their R2, but I'm a little late and eat a face full of axe, and now I have a better sense of what the timing is like, so the next time they go for their R2 out of neutral, I get behind them and get the grab before they're able to fully rotate to hit me out of it. This is one of those rare instances where that extra 15 degrees that the patch 1.10 probably saved my ass. This next fight, my opponent is very clearly on a very unstable internet connection. My ping monitor wasn't working for this fight, so I have no idea what the latency was like, but getting hit by that first strike was a good indicator that it's well over 300 ping. I'm determined to get the fish though, and I space his next attack, but the regular R1 Qs instead of my grab. But the attack goes straight through him, showing that he's suffering from some degree of packet loss, and he's likely on a VPN. I'm now trying to figure out how early I have to punish an attack in order to get inside his range, but he throws out the spin slash and we get comboed by the full thing thanks to the poise damage changes. I have to be careful with my frost build-up though, because if it procs then I'm just dead. I try and space out the next spin slash, but apparently I'm still in range of it, but I was able to get the block to avoid taking any damage. But at this point, I see the timing that I need to get the backstab, and I'll literally have to walk through his sword swing in order to be able to get to his back, just because of how bad the latency is. I get the grab, but he's still dropping packets, and he kills me, and continues to mash R1 at my corpse, until I come back with vengeance with a much-deserved backstab when the packets finally arrive at his computer. But I die anyway. The change to the angle check was very impactful for backstab escapes, and at this point the only surefire way to escape a backstab is either to jump out of it or to correctly roll directly into the backstab. Rolling into a backstab is always a good option, but now the angle is just a little tighter and a little less safe. We see an instance of that here as I roll behind my opponent's crouch attack and they roll in to try and escape the grab, but their angle wasn't perfect so the grab confirms anyway. Backstab grabs work through iframes, so as long as the grab happens when my opponent isn't yet in iframes, then the grab will be successful. After the backstab, my opponent backs off a large ways, seeming to have a hard time to figure out how to safely get in against the greatsword. After a while they come in with a running R1, panic roll, and then we roll catch and finish the fight with a backswing after the R2. Next up we run into Mugen, someone that I see in the arena very often and they're always a pleasure to fight. They're running Scythe though, and Scythe is the easiest weapon in the game to backstab, since you can strafe every attack in its moveset by either moving to the left or to the right, depending on the attack. So anytime I see this weapon, it's all I can think of, and I promptly start fishing very aggressively. I strafe to the right of the R1s, but I'm a little late for the grab each time. Then he follows up his crouch attack with a second R1, which comes out from the opposite side, so I strafe to the left and get the grab this time. Mugen's a good sport about it and gives me a little cheer. I immediately start fishing again and whiff a few more attempts, and he can punish it very well. I get behind the crouch R1 and drop my input, and I just kind of stand there awkwardly for a bit. But the input drop is the bane of my existence, and I guess it has something to do with how they patched Estus cancel, but I'm not entirely sure on the details. But I eat a few chip hits through my shield, and I try and find my spacing and timing, reading Mugen's attacks, looking for my opening. I'm just in range of my feather talisman, so I swap to the blue feather, so that I can get my extra defense boost, which I'm going to need because I need to go for a perfect block here to get the final backstab to finish the fight. As always, really well played by Mugen, and I had to rely on a cheesy tactic with perfect block in order to get the last backstab, since he played so well to avoid getting backstab from normal means. One of the other changes to patch 1.10 is that the second swing of the two-handed greatsword can be passive poised if you have 133 poise. So for video purposes, I threw on full bullgoats and went for a free backstab if my opponent ever goes for the second R1. My opponent had a very unique playstyle, using a lot of backsteps and R2s. They throw out a random R1 into the void. I close in to go for the backstab expecting the second swing, but instead they go for the backstab attack, which is even easier to backstab than I was expecting them to do. I go for the rake up with their R1 into their first backstab R1, avoid their hit, and finish the fight by punishing their backstab attempt. My next opponent is using a two-handed Shamshir, which is doing fairly alright in this patch, but it plays a lot differently than it did pre-patch, where the backswing of the weapon used to be king, but now it has to be played with very carefully. The Great Shield is a good answer to it, but I'm not likely to win if it comes down to trades. We see pretty quickly that they like to roll away unlocked, which is something that we're going to be able to take advantage of later on, but now we need to pressure them into it before we can go for that grab. As I showcased in my video on roll catching with backstabs, if the opponent rolls away unlocked, then you can pull them out of their roll animation into a backstab, but they need to be pressured into panic rolling. So until I can get their health low, I need to play my spacing very carefully and try and whiff punish their attacks without taking too much damage. They swap to Katana and start pressuring to get the running R2, which I find to be a lot more challenging to space than a Shamshir, so honestly not a bad call. But they start leading me up to the stairs, and I expect that they're trying to lure me into a situation where they can land a waterfowl dance, so I follow them up there and try and bait it out. They go for it and miss, and I land a Frostpot to punish, and pressure them expecting them wanting to bull us. They start panic rolling, and we get the backstab on the second panic roll. There's really not anything different about how this worked pre-patch. You can and always have been able to easily do this if you have enough practice. Next up, we see my opponent is Owen Trelson, a friend of the community and a great streamer over on Twitch. Be sure to go check him out. We see he's running the two-handed greatsword here, so once again I'll swap over to full bull goat to try and punish if he goes for any second R1 attempts, but Owen is a really good fighter and I don't really expect that they'll be easily backstabbed by a mistake like that. So this is more to counter the Knight's Greatsword ability to get the true combo on the backswing of the R1. I poison the second swing of the Greatsword, but my angle was bad here, so I missed the grab and just get a regular R1 instead, and we take a trade a few more times here. One thing that I keep noticing particularly early in this fight is that Owen is rolling forward toward me a lot, particularly after whiffing an attack. So that'll be another option that we can get a backstab attempt on that we're going to be looking for. I go into my menus here to see if I can find a weapon with Storm Stomp so that I can reset my poise. I need full poise in order to be able to tank the backswing of the R1. Weapons that provide hyper armor can reset your poise health back to full if they're strong enough, like with Storm Stomp or Wild Strikes. With my poise health reset, I go back to the funny flail and watch my opportunity roll past me as he rolls forward after whiffing. By now I'm dead set on getting that particular backstab, so I overspace his attacks and try and line up a punish on his forward roll, but miss my first attempt due to the bad angling on my part. I go back to looking for that opening again, dodge a few more attacks, find my opening off of his R2, which he forward rolls on, and I'm able to get the grab successfully to end the fight. For the last fight, we have a Lil Bro, and they have beautiful movement right out of the gate. So I go into my menus here because I thought that I was on my dex build, and I wanted to mirror them with katanas, but I don't have them, so I stick with the Zwei. They're playing really well, spacing out my attacks, not panic rolling. But I throw out a JR1 expecting them to close the distance, but they play patiently and stay away. I misinput a forward roll, and I think they did the same, and I try and roll catch with the crouch R1, but I accidentally get a backstab on their forward roll instead. It was completely unintentional, so I do this despair emote as a way to kind of like apologize, but they kind of just stare at me. I don't like landing unintentional backstabs, so I make sure that the next one I land is very clearly intended. I land a great JL1, and I crouch up on them to try and get a crouch poke, but they roll it very well. I fail to space the second JL1, but I see my opening as I expect them to go for the crouch L1, so I space and strafe enough to be able to get half hit from their attack, and soft swap to a Misericord to get the backstab to finish the fight. But that's all that I have for this video, so thank you for sticking around to the end, and be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.